Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. We hope that everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I know we did, Sherelle.
I certainly did. I laid around all day.
Yes. A lot of people were saying, well, what are you and Ira going to do? And I said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to take this opportunity to rest, kind of rejuvenate, clean up, and get some things done that I just don't get a chance to do normally. So I'm well rested and ready for what's next.
Well, I only promise my family 2 meals a year. Thanksgiving and Christmas. So Thanksgiving rolled up on me, and so I had to cook. It was no fun in it. I did it with love, though, but it was no fun in it. But I enlisted everybody in the house that's an able body, which is everybody in my house, to help. So I cooked everything except for my son cooked the greens, my daughter cooked the sweet potatoes, and my husband did he smoked the turkey breast and some chicken wings on the grill. So that was great. And my sister Kiki cleaned the chitlins. And so I cooked the remaining dishes. So we all just kind of pitched in and ate, and it was fabulous, if I must say so myself.
Yes, I'm telling you. I normally like to host on Thanksgiving. It's one of my favorite holidays, actually. But I cooked a little bit of this and a little bit of that for us, and I told my husband today I'm done with the leftovers because I don't do leftovers really well. Ooh. I ate my last plate of leftovers last night, and I'm done. So, as you all can see, we are not trying to be rude. We do have a guest here today, Tracy Jefferson, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her in a few minutes. But we are really here today to have a serious conversation about domestic violence in our community. And this young lady was courageous enough to come and talk to us about her own experience, and you see her books up here. We're going to talk about it from her perspective and really introduce her mindset during that time and where she is now. But we always have to start with a scripture. And so what we need everyone to do is to go to listenvisionlive.com so that you can see the show in its entirety. If you're on our social media feeds, you're only seeing our heads. You're not seeing the books or anything like that. So go on listenvisionlive.com. And if you have a question, please call into the show at 833-202-8255. And if there's anybody in your life that you think needs to hear this conversation, and it's going to be unlike any conversation you've probably heard in a while, I need you to tell them to tune in, okay? And if they can't tune in, take some notes that you can share with someone that in your family who may be going through this.
And also, as all of our shows are, this show will be posted on YouTube, and you can find it by searching Sisters in Company.
Exactly. And before we start with the scripture, what I want to do is make sure that I put a plug out for my 4th annual Women Thou Art Great Women Sharpening Women Conference that's going to be held on March the 23rd, 2019. You just go to Eventbrite, and I'm going to tell you, if you've never been to one of my women's conferences, you're missing a treat. The early bird tickets are still available at the small price of $99 for all that you get for a one-day conference until December the 1st. And the theme this year is unapologetically great. In my conferences, I aim to discuss all things that women deal with. So this is not just about one particular issue. And so we've talked a little bit about domestic violence in our first one. We've dealt with women who've lost children. We've dealt with women in cancer. We deal with so many issues that women deal with. And so that's what the conference is about. And we just have real talk, authentic talk, and we leave there with a network of sisters that can help us move through some of the challenges that we may face as women and to help each other. You know, I know my sister, you've met some people where you've been able to help them get employment, all kinds of things. So come on out. You will not be disappointed.
And I am your MC at the conference.
Yes.
And also this year coming up, I'm going to be one of the speakers.
Yes, she
talking
is.
about how unapologetically great I am.
That's right.
And so for those who have been to the show,
Yes.
you know, as the MC, I bring my A game.
Yes.
And I plan to bring my A game next year as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't really realize how important it is to have a good MC at a conference like this.
Oh, yes.
Because the MC could make or break the conference.
Yes.
The MC could either be one that people say, oh my God, is it her turn to speak again? Or they could really buy into your delivery and the information that you're providing them and the instructions that you're providing them. And of course, I do it with humor, sometimes with tears, you know, because we just cover a lot of topics. And so I'm going to really say, if you haven't been before, you definitely want to come next year.
Exactly.
Go ahead, mark your calendar. You know, we spend our money on other things that we want to do. And this is a conference is not like any other women's conference you've been to. And so everybody gets everything. You don't have to pick and choose between this topic versus that topic. We are here to deliver all of the topics to you. And one of the things I really like about the conference is we don't use PowerPoints.
No.
Because we don't want to PowerPoint people to death.
That's exactly
right. We
right.
ask all of our speakers to just be their authentic self.
Exactly.
And so that makes a huge difference. So, you know, people usually come with a script, but once they get into talking to the audience, the script goes out the window.
It does.
So just come on out and enjoy, relax. It's an all-day thing, but I promise you, when you eat lunch, the food is usually amazing.
It is.
And so you will not be sleepy afterwards because we're going to let you work out a little bit with Miss Honey Lamb.
That's right, Miss Honey Lamb. She's on the line today.
Yeah, so just come on out and enjoy.
Yes. And so make sure you get your early bird tickets before December 1st, because after December 1st, of course, the price has to go up. And so just wanted to give you all an opportunity to participate at the great rate of $99. All right. So we always start with scripture, Tracy. And so the scripture I selected as it relates to the theme that we're talking about today is Colossians 3:19 and Colossians 3:8. And the reason I selected these two particular scriptures is that people often say, well, you know, the Bible really doesn't say much about domestic violence. But it may not mention the words domestic violence, but let me tell you what it does say. In Colossians 3:19, it says, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Colossians 3:8 says, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. And so when you think about that, that speaks directly to what we're talking about, because people that are engaged in domestic violence, they are typically a spouse or a boyfriend. They're typically angry, right? Enraged, everything. And so harsh, you know, with their words and everything, filthy words and everything. And so I wanted to talk about this because, as you all know, there's been a lot of news lately around women who have been killed by their significant others. I mean, and it's just like every other day we're seeing it in the news. We're seeing it on social media. And so I reached out to a friend of mine, a soror, and I asked her, you know, I can talk about it, but I don't have the experience. And because we want to make sure that you, if this is your story, or you find yourself in this situation, that somebody who really has been through this can really impart some knowledge. And so today, and we're so appreciative, Tracy Jefferson is here. She's written her books, Suffering in Silence. And so this is the story, but also she has a survivor memoir where she asks some profound questions that we're going to get to in a minute in terms of journaling and helping people to really look at themselves and do a self-examination. And so that is why I have this book here, or my other books, because one of the things, as you all know about me, I'm all into self-examination. And we're going to get to, her deciding, with determination to move forward and get out that situation, and then what tools you use, that capacity, to change. What tools did you use to get you to where you are? So tell us a little bit about yourself, Tracy,
okay.
And then we'll go ahead and get started with the conversation.
All righty. Thank you so very much, first of all, for having me on your show.
Yes.
Ladies, thank you so much. I am a 56-year-old single mother. I have a 33-year-old son, Stephen. Hey, Stephen. I am a survivor. I love to laugh. I love, I've been working on my job for several years, and during this time, I was very insecure. So I'm going to talk about how I got there.
Can you take us back to maybe what age you were at the time when this happened?
I was in my 30s.
You were in your 30s, okay.
I was in my 30s. Several events had occurred. My mom passed away in 95, which was very detrimental to me. Mm-hmm. I was being laid off in May of that same year. So that was two occurrences that just caused me to feel low. Mm-hmm. And then I met him. And I'm thinking, instead of grieving for my mom, this was a blessing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the things I can truly say to people, when you're hurting, do not make a decision. Just deal with the hurt. So I'm thinking that this was a blessing. And in actuality, it was the furthest thing from a blessing. It was a curse. And I suffered for 6 years, long years, for that bad decision that I made in 95.
So let me just say this about domestic violence, and particularly about this show today. This is a no judgment zone, right?
Exactly.
Because this could be any of our stories.
Yes.
And it is a lot of our stories in some shape, form, or fashion. And so we have to, particularly as a community, we have to learn how to assist those that are in need of assistance, that are going through this, and we have to learn how to do that without judgment.
Exactly.
We have to learn how to do that without saying, if it were me, because
Exactly.
we don't know
Exactly.
what we would do if it was
Exactly.
us. And I'm going to share a story that happened to me when I was a teenager that I really believe was the first sign of something to come. And fortunately, the Lord took me away from that situation. So go ahead, Tracy.
And before you go on, I thank you for that, Sherelle, because this is so serious. And when I looked up, you all know I'm the researcher on the team.
Yes.
So
and
before
the one with the paper
now,
and
so
the
what the data says is that between 960,000 and 3 million incidents are reported each year, but they believe that it is estimated to be more than 10 million cases of domestic violence every year that goes on, and that the man is most often the perpetrator of this abuse, and it's normally a husband or a boyfriend. In other words, 1 in 3 women experience some type of domestic violence in their life. And this particular issue is seen as the largest human rights violation of our time. That blew me away. Because I had no idea that. I knew that it was prevalent. We see it. But for them to label it as one of the largest human rights violation of our time says a lot about what's really happening.
And to even break it down further, it's almost like every 9 seconds
Yes.
someone is being abused.
Yes.
So and just think all the ones that, if it's 10 million, just think of the other million that's not even being reported.
Exactly.
So
and let's be clear about what domestic violence is,
Yes.
right? Because most people automatically think physically abusive, right?
No,
but that's
not
just not it.
part of it.
Yeah.
You know, that's just a part of
Yes.
it. You know, and that's the part
Yes.
that, you know, you typically see the signs from, you know, because you have the bruises and that sort of thing. But let's be very clear. Domestic violence is anytime somebody is mentally, emotionally, physically, financially taking advantage of you. And so don't just think it's the physical aspect of it. It comes in very many different forms. And if somebody is calling you out your name and calling and cursing you out up one side and down the other, that is domestic violence.
Yeah, and let me tell you, when I was doing my research, I ran across this term. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Tracy. The term is intimate terrorism. I've never heard that before. And so it's about someone trying to take power and abusing you psychologically. And so that's where they have to get you. And, you know, you all know I wrote a book, Mind Your Mind, right? Mastering Your State of Mind, because it starts with the mind in terms of how that happens. So tell us about, you know, you meet this person in 1995 after grieving the loss of your mom, trying to grieve the loss of your mom and being laid off. What attracted you to this person, and tell us a little bit more about that story.
The first thing that really attracted me was his humor. He was really funny. And I love comedians, and I needed humor during that time. So that was one attractive thing to me. Another thing that was attractive to me, he could relate to my son. My son at the time was 10. So, you know, they kind of like the same video games, and, you know, I'm not into video games, so I didn't know any of that stuff. So, but he could really relate to my son. And so that was another thing I thought was attractive. And we could have really nice, long talks. And I just thought that was so amazing, because some men, you know, they say a few words and that's it, but we could talk for hours. And I just thought that was phenomenal to me. You know, I found somebody, he was younger than me, and then we could still have a conversation.
How much younger than you?
I want to say it was 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
I think it was about 6 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so that in itself, you know, I was intrigued by it.
Yes.
So therefore, we kind of started talking almost every day at that point, and so that's how it got started. So none of the intimidation or anything took place for a long time.
How long did you all date before you married?
6 months.
Okay, you dated.
Which we know that was, you know, that was not long enough. But
during that time there was nothing like that no. Internal voice, no signs, anything.
Well, let me say that yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. I take that back. You know, yes, it was. But me being the type of person I think that I was going to, as we say, change them.
Yes,
or
yes.
I can work with that, or it didn't seem that bad. Or, you know, that was my first excuse, my first lie I told myself.
And what were some of those things that you saw during the courtship that you said, I could just work with it, or I can change him? You mind sharing some of those?
A couple of things was he didn't keep a job. That right there was a red flag it should have been a red flag. He was subtly controlling, like, you know, where you going, or, you know, but I'm thinking, okay, it's a new relationship. I need to, you know, tell him where I'm going. I wasn't used to that. So I'm thinking, oh, that's cute. I don't mind sharing where I'm going.
I ain't doing nothing.
Exactly. Yes,
so,
yes.
Know, it's cute.
Yes.
So those were some little things that I thought was cute, but became problematic later on.
Yes.
And so those are little signs that little subtle things. I didn't have a cell phone during that time. If I did, I don't remember. I must didn't have it, but he would, was really always worried. I'm like, why are you worried? I know, if I say I'm going to go somewhere, trust me, I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to go to that place. So that's not being overly concerned. That's a problem.
Okay.
That's a problem.
And so how did it progress? So you date, and then after 6 months you marry.
Yes.
And then what flipped?
The whole thing flipped. The first couple of months was okay. Then, like I say, he wouldn't keep a job, and I was frustrated because, bills are coming in.
Yes.
So he would get a job, but he would take his money and buy carry-out food when we needed groceries.
Yes.
So I'm frustrated because, I've been doing this all by myself, and then now I have a man. So I'm thinking, when are you going to take over?
Right.
When are you going to start doing stuff? Well, he told me that I did all this before he moved in, so I should continue.
So he moved into your house.
He moved into my house.
Okay.
Yes. So when he made that statement, that hit me. Okay, so all these months you was doing this. It was all the front. So okay. So at this point, I'm frustrated, threw my ring off, and the first sign, he grabbed me by my throat and shoved me through the bathroom. And I had my eyes closed because I could not believe this person was doing this to me. I hit my hip on my door to my bathroom, and then he shoved me to the commode, and my back hit the back part of the commode. So his hands was around my throat, and it was like squeezing this part of your neck. And all I could do was just keep my eyes closed. I couldn't even look because I think I was scared to open my eyes.
Yes.
And so that in itself, that was like the very beginning. But then right after that, the flip would come. Then he would cry like a baby and apologize. Would get on his knees and beg, and I'm so sorry, I've never done this before, all this, and first of all, I know that was a lie because you did it too good. So I know you've done it before.
Right, right.
So somebody like me, I don't know how to really abuse a person. I could punch you in your arm, and but it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
But you grabbed my throat, had your whole hand around my throat, and shoved. So to me, that's not your first time doing it. So.
So after that incident, so he cried and said he was sorry. And we know, we've heard, and plus based on my research, that is one of the first signs, when a man is violent towards a woman, they do come back and get that sympathy. And so when he was in that mode after the first time, what were you thinking in terms of deciding to stay after that first situation?
Well, a lot of things went through my mind during that time. First, like I missed my mother because I knew I could be able to run to my mother. My mama wasn't there anymore. So I would go over to the cemetery and just sit for hours and just cry. And I would ask my mother, "Can you help me get out of this?" And I would apologize to my mother for things that I had done to her, trying to, repent for things when I was mad or mean to her.
Yes.
And I was like, "Mom, I'm so sorry, but I really need you right now. I really need you to help me get out of this." And I didn't know what to do. And this was the first time, and I'm in my 30s, without my mom, I didn't know what to do. I really didn't.
And you didn't have another close relationship with someone that you trusted to be able to share that with?
I did, but I didn't share. I didn't share for several reasons. One, I thought that was an isolated incident.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Then I didn't want anyone to look at him bad.
Right.
I can handle the criticism, but I just felt like, okay, let me let him be okay with everybody right now because
Protecting the abuser.
Right.
Exactly. So those were the main two reasons that I did not share. So it progressed. It was beginning to happen more often. Even though he would, say he wasn't going to do it again, and I would tell him, I would remind him, "You said you wasn't going to do this," and I'm like, "And you doing it again." And then he'll say, well, you made me do this. You did this. And I'm like, I'm saying to myself, and I know I'm not crazy. I'm funny crazy. I'm
Right.
like, funny.
Right.
I ain't crazy.
Right.
So I sat back and I'm like, okay. So if you gonna blame me, that's fine. Okay, I'll take the hit. Then I'll apologize for whatever I did. So you find yourself doing that a lot. Knowing I know I wasn't wrong. Knowing I know I didn't do anything.
And so you didn't come, I'm sorry, Sherelle, you didn't come from a family history, or you never seen that in your family before?
I've never seen it.
And so you found yourself in your 30s experiencing that.
Yes. What I found out, I personally never seen it, but my mom and my sister had told me that my dad had hit my mom one time. My mom had told me that herself. And then one of my sisters had told me that. And then my brother took care of him, and I don't think he ever did it again. So, but I didn't witness it. I was only told.
So that's critical what you just
Yes,
said. Your
yes.
brothers. Where's your brothers during this process? Did you just didn't share it with them?
Well, one brother was not here. The other brother, I just didn't feel that. And I shared this at my first book signing. I don't want to really go into family detail, but he was not available.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And so you had a brother that helped mom, but when you were going through, he just wasn't available to really help you. Okay.
He wasn't around.
Yes.
He
wasn't around.
Yeah.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Tracy Jefferson on the very serious topic that is now tagged as the largest human rights violation in our time, domestic violence. And we thought it was so necessary, and people are like, well, why are you talking about it this time of year? Well, the research is very clear that during major holidays, in football season or some major game is when you see an uptick in domestic violence.
Because of the gambling.
Because of the tension, and because of the increased alcohol intake as well.
That too.
And so that is why we're talking about it, because during this time of year, I was talking to someone the other day, and it just struck me. She said, Sister Sharon, she said, what you don't understand is that there are a lot of women out here who have it going on professionally. They're suffering.
Yes.
They're suffering in silence, and they don't know what to do because there's so many, right? And so you were suffering in silence. I think, Sherelle, you wanted to say something else about your experience.
Yeah. Before I talk about my experience, let me just say, Tracy mentioned a couple key things, right? Which seems to be pretty common amongst abusers. Number one, they're very charming.
Yes.
Right? They're very charming. People generally like them. They are very funny. They, people like hanging around them. And so that is not unfamiliar to the stories I've heard. And so it's important to pay attention to that. Not that, all people are funny, because I think my husband is funny, but he would never.
He's not abusive, though.
He's not abusive.
Exactly.
Because that's a whole new ball game. But, I'm a comedian, so I ain't making light of domestic violence, but sometimes we have to laugh at things in order to mask the pain. But when I was in high school, it's important to pay attention to the signs, and not just not make excuses for the signs.
Right.
So when I was in high school, I was dating this guy. He was popular. He was a basketball player, and he was really, really fine, right? And I don't remember him being like charming, right? I just don't remember that about him, but maybe he was. But back then in high school, I used to smoke cigarettes. And this gentleman decided that he didn't want me to smoke cigarettes. Now, I was able to smoke cigarettes in front of my parents in high school. Now, we ain't here to talk about that. That's a whole nother story. But, it was allowed in the home. And so when he decided that he didn't want me to smoke anymore, he decided he was going to take my cigarettes and rip them up. And so that was a sign, right? That was the beginning of the control. Now, fortunately for me, unlike Tracy, I have a very domineering mother who was she didn't even know about this incident, but I knew that if she found out about the incident, it would be some trouble, right? And not only trouble for him because he was trying to take control of me, but trouble for me for even staying with somebody who was going to try to control me. And so for me, I was fortunate enough that I was able to walk away from that relationship after that incident. And my sister Jackie and I, we laugh about it all the time now, because every time this guy's name come up, we just kind of laugh, and I'm like, you remember what happened, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I tell that story because at the time, I had no idea that that could be the beginning of domestic violence. But when you know, over the years since then, just kind of looking back and hearing people's story about how domestic violence starts, to me, that was a clear indicator that something a lot worse could have happened.
Right. And instead of him just saying, I wish you not smoke,
Right.
you would just snatch him from
Right.
you.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
So.
And so now you're married, and it's happened a couple times. Talk us through your thinking in terms of, you know, you went to your mom's grave, which I think was very powerful to have her spirit there, you know, to connect with yours, you know, because one of the questions that I love in her journal. And this is her book, Suffering in Silence. In her journal, there are just questions at the top of each page. And the one that just keeps sticking with me is, when is enough enough? So can you talk to us about there? When was enough enough, and what did that look like for you? Because it's different for everybody.
Right.
Yes.
Well, two things occurred. One, him and my son had an incident, an altercation, I should say.
And your son was at how old at that time?
My son at that time was about 14 or 15. And so them two were fighting. And
this is not your son's father.
it was not his
Okay.
dad, it's his stepdad. So that was one incident. And at this point, I'm already feeling like, you know what, I can't take no more. Then the final straw was when we had the bombing, the 9/11.
Yes, tell that story. That was interesting.
The 9/11 came, and I didn't go to work that day because I actually had a doctor's appointment. I had a doctor's appointment because he had punched me in my head so hard that I had this knot on the side of my head, and my head was hurting for like days. So when I came, the report came back normal, wasn't nothing wrong. My doctor told me just take some ibuprofen, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the nurse behind the counter, I'm checking out, and she said, what are you about to do? I said, I'm getting ready to go to work. She said, well, where do you work? And I said, D.C. She said, it's shut down. Okay, so how's D.C. shut down? I didn't hear anything about it. So she told me about the bombing, and I'm like, wow.
The
Okay,
plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
Pentagon.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
I worked around the corner from the Pentagon.
Okay.
So my so during that time, so I got home, and I found out that my job was going to be closed the very next day. So that same day, he came home. He said he was concerned about me because the job, you know. I said, well, you didn't call me. You didn't, you know, I didn't get no calls from work or whatever. So how was you concerned? So he pulled me and he said, come here. He wanted me to sit on his lap. So I was really reluctant to sit on his lap. So he said, are you scared of me? And I didn't answer. He said, so he like pushed me off of him. And he said, well, when are you going to move? And I said, no, when are you going to move? And he said, I will blow this expletive house up before he move. So I'm like, okay. So he said he'll blow it up with me and my son in it.
Yes.
So at that point, I'm like, okay, that's enough right there. That's
right.
my enough. So
That's
the
your
fact
enough.
that, you know, you hit my son, even though my son did get a good punch in there himself, he told me. So we high-fived each other on that one.
That's right.
You know, so I was
Yes.
like, okay, as long as you got back, that's fine. So so the next day, I made my way to the Charles County Courthouse, which I've never been. Lived in Charles County for 3 years and never even seen the court building or anything.
Yes.
So that was my enough. So when I got before the judge, well, I had to go fill out a lot of paperwork, and I told the lady I was nervous. Please help me out. And she said, I got you. She was so kind and she was so nice. I really wish I could remember her name because she really helped me and I documented. I had to tell from the beginning to the end.
Yes. You know, and talking with Tracy prior to the show, one of the things, I found a couple of things so interesting about you and particularly about this part of the story. And I just had no idea. You know, people often say to people, there's a lot of resources for them. And you shared the story about when you showed up, you know, there just really wasn't. They didn't know what to do with you. Can you kind of talk about that in terms of your career and your having a house and?
Yeah, I was laying on the bed one day and I was watching Channel 7 News, and there was a CEO from a big organization, which I'm not gonna name. Didn't name it in my book, so I can't name it today. She was speaking to Channel 7 viewers and saying, if you're in domestic violence, call this number.
Right.
Okay, so I'm like, you know, I'm excited because I'm like, oh, I can call somebody and get some help. So I called the number, and the lady that I spoke with, she said, well, tell me a little bit of what's going on. So I told her I'm being abused, and it is happening quite often. And she said, where do you live? I said, well, I live in Charles County. I had a house in D.C. that I was renting out. I had a really good job during this time. I had a car. And my son, like I said, I think he was 14 or 15. Well, she told me that I have too much.
Oh,
and
wow.
can I stick it out?
Wow.
Can you stick it out?
Can I stick it out?
Yeah, that's.
She said because the people that
Right.
usually come to their centers are homeless and they don't have, you know, a place to go. And I said, well, where do a person like me go? I can't help it if I have two homes and a car. So what are you saying to me? And she had no answers for me.
That is so interesting. So hold on, if you don't mind. We have a caller. Okay. Let's take our caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, ladies.
Hi. Welcome to Sisters and Company. What can we help you with? What's your
Thank
question?
you. Thank you. This is Philip from Chicago. I know
Hey,
domestic
Philip.
violence is not exclusive to women only. That's
Right.
just one piece. And the question I have to ask for your guest is, how much does culture, movie, like The Color Purple, or music with the B word and the H word, and even television, hip-hop, well, love and hip-hop anywhere, how much does that play in the mind of the violent individual, the ones that are cussed out of the, you know, because we see all this stuff on these, what they call these television shows. I can't think of the word of them. But, you know, because we see them cussing each other out, attacking each other. I can't think what they call these variety shows.
Reality shows.
Reality
shows.
How much does, reality, there you go, thank you. How much does that play in the culture of violence, especially when it comes to domestic violence?
And before we let Tracy answer, let me say something, and let me be very, very clear, because I knew that question or that statement was going to come. Let's make no mistakes about it. This show is about women being abused by men, and the data shows that men who get abused, they're not physically abused necessarily, but they are typically in
Emotionally.
well, no, and they're in same-sex relationships, a lot of them. And so there is just no comparison. The women are the ones who are overwhelmingly abused by men, husband or boyfriend. So I just want to make sure that we are very clear about that, and we'll have a show about men at some other time who are willing to come and have that conversation. But today, that's what this is about. And so you can respond to his question if you can.
Well, I'm not a big reality show watcher, and I don't believe they were out back during that time.
95, 96.
95, 96. I actually, 2001 was when I had him removed from the house, so I don't remember watching reality TV back then. So what they do now, I've seen some episodes where people are throwing glasses and tables and chairs. Yeah, that's abusive, you know.
It is.
Towards each other. And I don't watch it because that's what it is. And I don't find that
So that's why I
entertaining
also
at all.
mentioned The Color Purple, movies like that, because you remember how, you know, the men in those movies,
Right.
or those times, were very violent and things like that. And the music that has been going on for the last 40 years, I guess, with the B word and the H word and the way that the brothers in the music, denigrate black women especially. So I was just wondering, you said his brother was younger than you, and a lot of the men, we grew up in a culture of dominating women. So that's kind of, I'm not just talking about this era, but I'm talking about even in because we used to have a neighbor that when we was little, we heard them getting abused all the time.
That is correct.
Absolutely.
And so, so it is a culture that continues. But, I guess we got to somehow break the cycle somehow.
So let me just say this.
I'm still listening, but thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Phil. Let me just say this. We have to be responsible for our own actions, right? Mm-hmm. There are so many people, if you think about all of the people in the world that don't abuse, that listen to the same music, watch the same shows, and even curse the same way, they don't abuse. Right. And so to put that on an entity instead of taking responsibility is wrong. If you are an abuser and you're saying that you're calling your female partner out of her name because Lil Johnny said it in a song, that is BS. And you need to stop it. And you need to take responsibility for what you do. Because one of the things I know is abusers don't want to see their mother in that situation. Exactly. They don't want to see their sister in that situation. Or they saw them in that situation, but they didn't like it. Right. Yeah. They didn't think it was the right thing to do. They didn't think it was right for their own females in their family. And so why would you then subject any other female to that type of behavior is beyond me.
Because behavior is repeated. And that is the
truth. But it doesn't have to be.
It's a learned behavior.
It is a learned behavior, but it doesn't have to be.
You can stop the curse that's in you. If you see it happening, it's you doing it, you have the ability to stop it.
And if you're with somebody that you feel like you need to abuse, you need to step out of that relationship. Yes. Just move away from it, because that relationship is not only not healthy for the female, it's not healthy for you either as the male who's the abuser.
And then you have children watching that, or if they're not watching it, they hearing it.
Yes.
So that's just as bad.
And I heard a young man at her event yesterday that talked about, if you're growing up, your parents tell you, if anybody hits you, you hit them back. But he realized as he became older that he had power over women. And so if a woman hits him or hit him, he wasn't going to hit that woman. He restrained her, because that's a whole nother conversation about we as women, putting our hands on men. And then when they hit us back, and I know some people that's happened to. When they hit us back, then we try to make it seem like they're the wrong ones when they've been trying to tell us don't do it for the longest period of time. Right. And so that domestic violence is just it's just interesting to me in terms of the mindset around people who put themselves in that situation, who allow it because of the embarrassment, the guilt, and feeling alone. And I can only imagine, I was thinking about my own life, and I was thinking, I've always been the type of person that would say that jail don't look good on me. Right? I had a man to tell me, and I'm just going to be explicit so you all can get the realness of it. A man, he told me one time, he said, "What if I get up and smack the shit out of you?" And I believe words. Y'all know how I'm sensitive to words. And I'm like, okay. And the only thing I could remember saying was, "Please do. And you better kill me. Because if you don't, I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to run you over. I'm going to back it up. And I'm going to run you over again to make sure you did."
And then my sisters are going to come.
Exactly.
And run you over with their car.
But what was it in me that rejected, you follow what I'm saying? Something like that. And I was an adult. I had a man to grab me one time, and because I was walking away, and I was like, "Please do not ever put your hands on me." I mean, and so we all come to it differently. I think about all the women who are in prison for self-defense, right? And
if they only would have told someone that we have got to stop being silent.
Yes, exactly.
Because I think the women that's in prison 99% of the time, I'm quite sure they was defending themselves.
Exactly.
Right.
But
Exactly.
they have no proof that it was taking place.
Exactly, because they didn't
So
report
it's like,
it.
yeah, it's their word against the deceased.
So what kept you?
Hold on, let me ask this.
Okay.
Let me just point this out too. Tracy said something else that was a deal breaker for her child, right?
Yes.
That's I hear that a lot with women saying, okay, and I even heard somebody put it, and I'm gonna quote this: "It was one thing for him to abuse me,
Yep.
but when he hit my child, that's when it was enough." And I asked her, well, why was it okay when he was
Right.
doing it to you?
Yeah.
Why wasn't that enough? And so I hear women say that, frequently it moves, it goes from the mother to the child. And while the man that's abusing don't necessarily feel like they're abusing the child, they just feel like the child stepped out of line and they're disciplining them. And so I just wanted to point that out and not let that get glossed over.
And one of the things I like to say, I bless God that you are even here
Yes.
and alive, because the stories that we've been watching recently, and you've seen them, these women, they left, they did the right thing for the most part, and they're still dead because of these abusers. And so bless God that you're here and that you left that situation. And so what was the transition like for you as you left that situation? What happened when you left? I know you
Right.
said that was the moment, but what did you do after he
Well-
said what he said to you?
The very next day was when I went to the courthouse.
Right.
And at this time, the city was looking for bin Laden. And even though I made a joke, I told the judge and the bailiff and everybody, I said, if you're looking for bin Laden, he at my house. So they laughed, and so they allowed me to tell everything.
Yes.
And at that point, that was the very first time that I didn't realize how much pain I had deep down in me, that I was able to tell everything. And when I say everything from when we lived in D.C. to when we moved to Charles County. And I honestly could say, I think the bailiff even had tears in his eyes, because he handed me tissue, because I finally was
Released
like,
it. Yes.
you
You
know,
released it. Yes.
So, and after that, I can admit I was still a little nervous. I was, on edge all the time.
Yes, I'm
on
sure.
God, told my son, let's just keep a lookout. But I have to truly give God the glory for the Charles County Police Department. I know they don't get a good rap, but I know they had officers like coming past my house often.
Oh, wow.
They was, and I knew I saw them, and I'm like, thank you. So that kind of put some ease, on me for a while. But I always made sure I slept with something, had some type of weapon somewhere around,
So tell the story
house.
about that when you were in the house one time and your back door, your basement or something door. Yeah.
I had come home from church, and where we used to live, just in case if anyone lost their key, we always left the basement window unlocked. So that way my son could, come in, unlock the door. I wouldn't climb through a window, but they would climb through. So my brother-in-law at the time, me and his brother was really good friends. And he had called me. He said, look, make sure you lock the door, lock the window, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So I ran downstairs and I locked the window. Well, I had completely forgot about that. So one day I came home from church, and I was just staring, just like she's staring.
I want to talk about your book in a minute.
I was staring out my window, and just like, I can't believe I'm here. Just really just reflecting on everything that I had gone through. And all of a sudden, I could see in the screen, it was some 2 slits in the screen. And I looked again, like, oh my God. So when I looked to the ground, there was a tool, like I'm not sure if it was a screwdriver, it was some type of sharp object in the ground, or laying on the grass. And I really felt at that point, he was trying to get in that window. So I thank God for my brother-in-law for telling me, don't forget to lock that window. And even though that was his brother, he loved me. And my brother-in-law, we've never had any relationship or anything like that, but he truly loved me, and he looked out for me. So I would have probably been dead if he could get through that window.
My God.
So
let me ask you this. So, okay, so you go to the courthouse, and essentially, did they come and remove him from the premises? And he eventually got locked up, and
no, he
like,
didn't get
or
locked
you
up.
moved, like what? Like,
Nope, I stayed in the
How
house.
did you keep him from coming back harassing you?
Well, I can't say what kept him away. Once I got the ex parte, that's granted for 7 days. So he had to be gone for 7 days. I was actually at my neighbor's watching, and it took a long time. And I'm like, you think they killed him? Because we was trying to figure out why is it taking so long. I've been waiting, and then he finally had come out. And what I didn't know was he had to call someone. They had to know where he was going.
Okay. Yes.
So he had to make a call, and he had called his brother. And like I said, me and his brother was really close, and his brother told me, I thought it was you. If I'd known it was him, I wouldn't answer the phone. So we laughed, and I said, well, I'm sorry. He said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, well, I didn't know if I could really, not because I trust him, but I knew I could trust him.
That was your brother. Yeah.
Right. But so he had he went to his brother's house. So the sheriff had to make sure that he had enough clothes because he had been gone for 7 days. So when they escorted him out, they stayed there the whole time, and then he drove off. And I'm watching from my neighbor's window. And so at that point, I had changed my locks. My son saw the police coming, leaving, so he came running up the hill, to make sure his mama was okay. So I had already had locks bought so he could change the locks. And so we kind of had some fear going on for a couple of days. For me, I'm gonna say probably about a month. I mean, at least for me anyway. So, and if that was him that came back from that window situation, I never saw him after that.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Yes.
So I think, to me,
Wow.
I think the Charles County Police Department might have scared him.
Yes.
Because the sheriff actually came to my house to serve me, because after 7 days you have to get served to go back to court, and he never showed up. But the sheriff told me, he said, I can only imagine what you went through, because he said they almost had to arrest him just to serve him the
Paperwork.
So he showed off on his job. So if he would show off on his job, you know what he did at home.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know time is running out, so it goes by so fast. Tell us about your books and what inspired you to write the book and the journal. What was the goal?
The goal in the book writing,
Suffering in silence.
Suffering in silence.
And what's this picture about?
That look,
Yes.
that's just how I used to look. I would have a blank look all the time. Even though I was trying to be, I would go to work and was fine at work. But when you by yourself and you just trying to figure out what happened, where did I go wrong? How did this happen to me? So when I saw this, she's a beautiful person, and who would ever thought that she was being abused? The title came because that's what I did. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my coworkers. I told a few people, like my best friend Joyce. I ended up, we stopped being friends because she couldn't bear.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
that-
And Joyce is in the studio with us today.
Hey, Joyce.
Yes.
That's another point that I've heard from
Yes.
other women who've been victims of domestic violence. Let me not even call you a victim, a survivor
survivor.
of domestic violence, is that they end up not maintaining a relationship with those that are closest to them, and particularly their friends, because of it.
Yeah. Because for one, they hurt just like you hurt.
Right.
They love you enough that they don't want to bear to see you hurt. So so I chose that because that's what I did. I suffered in silence. The book came about because I really just chronologically looked over my life and saw how I got here. And if you read the book, I had several deaths. My sister was like my best friend ever. She was the first person that passed. Then her son was murdered on the streets of D.C. 6 months to the day of her death. Then her dad, my brother-in-law, he died. Then my mom. So I had all these deaths back to back.
Was that like a year time frame or?
It was with like a year. My sister and and her son, that was 6 months.
Okay.
So that was 89 to 90. My brother-in-law died in 92. And my mom died in 95.
Okay, so yeah, close
so
together.
It's close.
And hold that thought for a second. Let's take this call because we're almost out of town.
Okay.
Hello, thank you for calling Sisters and Company.
Hi, how are you?
We're good. How are you? Who are we speaking with?
I'm good.
Hey,
You
Mimi.
speaking with Muriel?
Hi, Muriel. What's your question? We have about 2 minutes left.
I just want to know, how did Tracy make out with her? How did this impact her son going through this type of experience?
Yes, very good question.
Yeah. Well, me and my son did a lot of work. I sat him down, and I had to apologize to him. I apologized to him for bringing him into this situation because he didn't ask for it. Then I have a part in my book where I talk about a lot of insecurities, like from abandonment down to, just issues. And I let him know all these issues that I had been dealing with, and that was why I settled, and that was why I stayed so long. And I actually allowed my son to tell me, because my son was really angry at me. He hated me for a long time. So I allowed him to tell me about myself, all the things that he hated about me. And from that point on, we built our relationship. And to this day, he's 33, and we are truly like best friends now.
Yes. And, thank you, Muriel, for that.
Calling me, May.
Yes, for that question. And what I would like to do, I think this is such a necessary conversation, Tracy, because you talked about it from your son. I tried to get her son to come on. He's not ready. But we do have our best friend. And so I don't know if we need to have a part 2 of this conversation, because I feel like it's so much more that you can share with those out there, anyone out there who's struggling with this, who's in it right now, because we haven't even gotten to what would you tell people, because the time is over. So I don't know. We'll talk about what your schedule looks like for next Sunday. Maybe come and do a part 2, and then maybe Joyce or maybe your son would like to join in to talk about it from their perspectives, because there are many people who have a similar situations. That's why the question Muriel asked was so profound and so good. And so I would like for us to continue the conversation.
And I was going to say, in the book, I list resources. I didn't have this when I was going through it. So if you get my book, even if you go to my website, www.tracyjefferson.net, I have lots of resources there.
Yes.
They wasn't there when I was it wasn't prevalent to me when I was going through. I didn't know anything about any of these organizations, but I'm making them known now, so they can definitely go on the website.
Okay.
Wow.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
This was a heavy topic.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right.
And it's a
Yes,
necessary
thank you.
topic.
Definitely, I would like to listen to part 2 of it, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tracy.
You're welcome.
We are out of time. I want to
All
say
right, thank you.
thank you,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Tracy, for being so transparent and being
yes.
so honest about your story. This is definitely a heavy topic, and I agree with Sharon that we need to have some follow-up shows.
Yes, because I want to make
topic.
sure that people get out what they need to, out of this conversation that's going to help them, not only to help themselves, but to help somebody else. Because we do not want another woman to die at the hands of a man.
Someone who say they love them.
You. Exactly. Yeah. And, that is so important. And how do you get your power back? Because I think that is really part of it. You taking your power back, because we relinquish power, our power to people all the time.
And one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about that I would love to talk about on the next one is how you laid down and had sex with these suckers after they didn't abused you.
Yeah, well, and exactly, and I know that
after a while. So
I'm sure
after a long while,
right? And then what further problems that caused when it stopped? right? Because that's part of the manipulation, I believe. And so thank you so much. I know this was a heavy conversation, but I think it's a necessary conversation. As you all know, we are here to help educate and to help build our community. And these are the kind of conversations that we have got to have, because it's happening everywhere, and we need to make this the smallest human rights violation of our time, not the largest. And so how do you do that? Through conversations like this. So thank you, Tracy.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
Yes,
for having
absolutely.
Me.
And hopefully we can have part 2 next week.
Okay.
All
All right.
Sounds
Well,
good.
thank you,
all.
audience, for calling in and participating. We'll see you all next Sunday. Have a blessed afternoon.